Alright, it's time to rank another soundtrack. This time I'm going to be doing Ninja Gaiden on the NES. As always, I'm just doing the stage themes, so no intro, no ending, etc. Just the stage themes, and because some of the stage themes repeat, you'll hear a song again in another stage. I'll label them by the first level that you hear them on, but I will leave an annotation of where else that song is also heard. As always, I will preface this by saying that this ranking is just my opinion. It's okay to feel differently. I can agree to disagree, no problem. Just respect my opinion, and I will certainly respect yours. I encourage discussion and debate, so feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. So without any further ado, let's get on with the list. Number 9, Act 3-1. The whole soundtrack is mostly up-tempo, but this one has this frantic sense of urgency, like you need to escape or something. It's cool, but it doesn't change. It feels like it's gonna change up into a breakdown or something, but then it never does. And I always say that a faster-paced song will get older quicker if it doesn't change, because you'll hear the same measure more often in, say, a half a minute than you would if it were slower. Number 8, Act 4-3. Speaking of slower, here's another repetitive song, but it's slower so it doesn't get old as fast. It's a nice change of pace and the slowest song of the whole soundtrack, but like Act 3-1, it doesn't really go anywhere, although it does at least build up a little bit. The bass picks up after a few measures and then the beat drops, but from there it just stays in one spot the rest of the way. And like the previous song on this list, it's a shame because it's a pretty good section as a standalone by itself, but it's so incomplete it needed another section or two to complement it. Number 7, Act 5-3. It's nice to hear a mid-tempo tune amongst all the shredding that's going on in the soundtrack, and I know that these 3 songs that started the list have gone from up-tempo to down-tempo to mid-tempo, and all I've talked about is how fast-paced the majority of the soundtrack is, but that's mainly because the rest of this list, after this, is gonna be like that. Anyway, for this song, I like how it sounds subdued during the intro, then the beat drops, and it's the same riff from the lead. And it's really, everything's the same for the most part, but now there's a snare drum and a hi-hat. It's amazing what one component of an instrument can do to make a song sound so different. Not even the whole instrument, just the hi-hat and snare. And it's a really cool riff, but then it's mostly all that you hear the rest of the way. It does have a change, and it feels like it's going to be a whole new section, but it only lasts for one measure before going back into the main verse. Still a cool song. Number 6, Act 4-2. This one's a little more melodic and catchy than a lot of the other songs on the soundtrack, but I wish the turnaround was repeated back-to-back at least once. But then again, I noticed that a lot of times when I wish that I could hear a part in a song more often, a lot of times it's probably because if I did hear it more, I wouldn't appreciate it as much. Maybe, I don't know. I really like the rhythm section in this song. The bass is kind of driving the car of the whole song, and the hi-hats are low-key awesome, because they're not so robotic. It has this authentic feel to it. It helps to make the song sound live, like it's being played by humans, and not so much like it's programmed. Number 5, Act 2-2. The beat is up-tempo like the rest of the soundtrack, mostly, but the verses have a deliberately paced lead. I generally like that dynamic of the lead going at one pace while the rhythm section goes at another, as long as they're in time with each other, of course. The refrain goes in another direction, though, as the lead picks up the pace, and it splits into 2 halves where there's 2 different tones. It's pretty cool. And I also like how the verse has the same pattern throughout, but each measure has a slight change in terms of the notes. So there are different variations sprinkled throughout. I love shit like that. Number 4, Act 3-2. This is one of the simpler songs on the soundtrack, kind of, sort of, but they do a pretty cool trick with it. The first verse has this 2-note riff that bounces back and forth between 2 different variations. Then it goes into this subdued refrain for a change of pace. Then when you think it's gonna go back to the main verse, it goes into a whole completely different verse. Then you realize, actually, it really is the same verse, it's just that they're playing it with twice as many notes. So it's simple, but it adds this, little weird twist to it. Number 3, Act 1. Awesome playing here. As far as just from a pure technical standpoint, everything is crazy busy and all over the place. Like, I love how the stutter happens in the breakdown transition when it loops back into the verse. You know, it goes back to what I was saying before about how it sounds authentic and played by a human being. Which this style of music, of course, it sounds better. The more authentic and live you can make it sound, the better it will be. It definitely complements it well. I guess my only gripe is that I wish there was another section. Or at the very least, the breakdown could have doubled up with another 4 measures just to give the main riff a break. Other than that, awesome. Number 2, Act 2-1. The refrain in this one goes up and down the scale, but it does so in a pulsing, consistent manner, whereas the verses are noodly and spread out. It's quite reminiscent of Act 1, which, funnily enough, is the level right before this one. The percussion is awesome throughout this whole soundtrack, and I haven't talked about it as much as I probably should. But this track in particular stands out to me when it comes to the drums. Again, not to sound like a broken record, but it does sound live and authentic and real. Like it's being played by a live drummer. And just the drums in general can dictate how authentic a song could sound. And I'm not trying to harp on electronic music or like that kind of thing. I love industrial music. I have no problems with, program music in general, but, there's a time and a place for it, and even though this is, a Nintendo game, the fact that they can make these songs sound live for this style of music, it really works, and in fact, if it were brought to my attention that these songs actually were played live by a band, and then it just was converted to the NES, it wouldn't shock the hell out of me, because they do sound that authentic. Number 1, Act 5-1. This one has 3 sections to it, but the changes happen so often that the loop ends pretty quickly. One thing that's pretty cool is the first time you hear the intro, you only hear it for 1 measure. Then you get to the verse, and then this solo-ish refrain, and then it kicks back to the intro. But this time, you hear the intro with 3 measures. And that's how it goes every other time that the loop comes around. You don't hear change-ups like this in the video game soundtracks of the time very often. And I always like that sort of thing. The more unpredictable a song is, the more times you have to hear it before you know it too well. And then it gets tiring. That and all the riffs in this song are just awesome. So that's it for this list. Here is a quick recap. Number 9, Act 3-1. Number 8, Act 4-3. Number 7, Act 5-3. Number 6, Act 4-2. Number 5, Act 2-2. Number 4, Act 3-2. Number 3, Act 1. Number 2, Act 2-1. And number 1, Act 5-1. So that's it for this list. What were your thoughts? What do you think of the soundtrack in general? What do you agree or disagree with? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. So that's it for this one. I'll see you next time.